Good morning and welcome to this meeting of the Licensing Subcommittee. I am Alice Aubrey from Democratic Services. The subcommittee today is made up of councillors James Giles, Noel Hadji-Michael and Tai Allen. The first item of business is the appointment of a chair for the meeting. May I ask subcommittee members to nominate a chair?
I nominate Councillor Giles.
I second it.
Thank you. That's agreed. Councillor Giles is in the chair. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, members, and thank you, Alice. This meeting is being broadcast live, is being recorded, and will be made available on the Council's YouTube channel. The agenda is available on the Council's website by following the links to Your Council, Decision-Making, Consultations and Surveys, and then Committee Agendas and Minutes. The quorum for this meeting is 3 members, and all will need to be present at all times. If any subcommittee member or the legal advisor lose connection, I'll pause the meeting to allow them to rejoin as soon as possible. And to reduce feedback, if I could ask everyone else in the meeting to mute their microphone when they aren't speaking. After the subcommittee has heard the submission, I will ask members if they have any questions. Members can also indicate that they wish to speak by using the chat function or the hands up function. But please don't use the chat function to ask questions of officers or members. And please remember that all meeting participants on this video call will be able to see what has been entered into the chat. If I could also ask those on the call to keep their mobile phones in silent mode or switched off during the meeting, just to again reduce feedback. As Alice has said, my name is Councillor Giles, and we're joined this morning by quite a large number of people on this call. So one by one, I shall just go through the participants so everyone knows who we all are. So my name is Councillor James Giles, and I'm joined this morning by Councillor Noel Hadji-Michael.
Thank you.
Councillor Tai Allen.
Yeah, good morning.
Our legal advisor today is Guy Bishop.
Good morning.
Our licensing officer, Marcella Basso.
Good morning.
The applicant's agent, Noel Samaru.
Sorry, good morning.
Thank you. I understand the applicant, Ahilan Aru Anantham, forgive me on the pronunciation, may join us, but he's working also in the shop, so represented primarily by their agent. We're joined by Richard Odell, who's the Council's Environmental Protection Officer.
Good morning.
We're joined by Louise Gallagher from the Council's Public Health team.
Good morning.
Morning. We're joined by PC Lee Hopkins from the Metropolitan Police Service.
Yeah, good morning, everyone.
Thank you. We're joined by Mr. Armin Soleimani, who is Counsel for the MPS.
Good morning.
Good morning. We're joined by PC Lydia Hume, who I understand is the PC for the area, who's joined us by telephone.
Yeah, good morning.
Thank you. We also have one other person in the meeting, as they are described in the legislation, and that's Mr. David Williams.
Good morning.
Good morning. And last but certainly by no means least, we have Alice Aubrey from Democratic Services with us. So item 2 on the agenda is declarations of interest. Does any member of the subcommittee have a pecuniary interest, non-registrable interest, or other registrable interest to declare in relation to the application today?
No.
No.
Terrific. Thank you very much. And colleagues, can we confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of November 2024 as a correct record?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. I'll sign them at a later date. So moving on to the procedure for this meeting, the parties have already been notified of the usual procedures for these licensing hearings, which are also set out on pages 3 to 5 of the agenda pack. Paragraph 57 on page 4 deals with notification of the decision following the subcommittee's deliberations. This will firstly be confirmed by email later today, and the full details and reasons will follow within 5 working days. Are there any objections to proceeding on the basis of those procedures? Terrific. In which case we'll move on to the hearing, which is for application for a variation of a premises license under the Licensing Act 2003 for the premises Victoria News, Unit 3, Chesington North Railway Station, Bridge Road, Chesington, KT9 2RT. which you can find in Appendix A on page A1 of the agenda. So I'm going to first call Marcella Basso, who is the licensing officer, to introduce the report on the application. Thank you, Marcella.
Thank you very much, Chair. This application relating to Victoria News Unit 3, Chessington North Railway Station, Bridge Road, Chessington, KT9 2RT, was made on the 22nd of October 2024 by Noel Samaru of Entad Consultants Limited on behalf of Ahilan Arulanantham. The application seeks a variation to their existing premises license to extend the hours for the sale by retail of alcohol, off sales only, to 8 a.m. to 3 a.m. the following day on Monday to Saturday, and 10 a.m. to 11 p.m. on Sunday. The application also seeks to extend the opening hours to 6 a.m. to 3 a.m. the following day on Monday to Saturday, and 10 a.m. to 11 p.m. on Sunday. Relevant pages of the application form are attached at Annex 1 of the licensing report. The premises currently benefits from a license that authorizes the sale by retail of alcohol, off sales only, from 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. on Monday to Saturday, and from 10 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. on Sunday. The current opening hours are 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. on Saturday, and 10 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. on Sunday. A copy of the current license is attached at Annex 2, and the current and proposed hours of operation are laid out in Annex 3. I confirm that the applicant has advertised the application by way of a public notice displayed at the premises and in a local newspaper. The application has also been made available on the Council's website for the full consultation period. I confirm that all responsible authorities received a copy of the application. Representations were received from the Metropolitan Police in relation to the prevention of crime and disorder licensing objective, and from the Council's Environmental Health Pollution Control Officer in relation to the prevention of public nuisance licensing objective. Public Health also made a representation to the application in relation to the prevention of crime and disorder and prevention of public nuisance licensing objectives. These representations are attached at Annex 4. Some additional material was submitted by the Metropolitan Police in support of their representation, and this material is included within Annex 4. In accordance with the Council's licensing policy, 62 addresses were consulted in writing and informed that an application had been received. 4 valid representations were received from other persons. The representations make reference to matters that relate to all 4 licensing objectives. Copies of the representations are attached at Annex 5. I can confirm that copies of all representations have been forwarded to the applicant and have been made available to the licensing subcommittee. A map showing the approximate location of the premises is attached at Annex 6, and photographs of the premises are attached for your information at Annex 7. When applying for a variation of premises license, the applicant is required to complete an operating schedule. This describes the steps the applicant proposes to take in order to promote the licensing objectives if the application is granted. For this application, the applicant is not proposing to add to the existing conditions on the license. However, the subcommittee must, having regard to the representations made, modify these existing conditions if it considers that such a step is appropriate for the promotion of the licensing objectives. As stated earlier, a full copy of the current premises license is included in Annex 2. In considering this application, the subcommittee is required to take into account the Secretary of State's guidance issued under Section 182 of the Licensing Act 2003, our licensing policy, and the licensing objectives. The Council's licensing policy includes some guidelines on licensing and trading hours, and these guideline hours can be found in Annex 8 on page A63. Some late material was received from the applicant's agent yesterday morning on Monday the 9th of December. The late material was published on the Council's website, and members of the licensing subcommittee and all parties to the hearing were informed that the material had been submitted. Within the late material, the applicant proposes to amend the application by reducing the terminal hours for the sale by retail of alcohol to midnight, Monday to Thursday, and to 1 a.m. on Friday and Saturday. For clarity, please note that the published document states that the hours are to be reduced to midnight, Sunday to Thursday. However, the agent confirmed that this was an admin error and it should have stated Monday to Thursday. On Sunday, the terminal hour remains 11 p.m. Members, you're asked to determine the application having regard to the representations received and any evidence heard at the hearing in line with the options set out in paragraph 16 of the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation, Marcella. Councillor Hadji-Michael, do you have any questions for Marcella at this point?
No, thank you, Councillor Charles.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Thailand, do you have any questions for the licensing officer? I'm going to take that silence as a no. And I don't have any questions either. So thank you very much indeed, Marcella. I now will call on the applicant's agent to give a summary of their application. Paragraph 47 on page 3 of the agenda pack deals with the length of time an applicant can speak. And so in this case, Mr. Samaru, you have up to 20 minutes to present your client's submission. Alice will advise you when you have 1 minute left, if indeed you're still speaking after 19 minutes, and when your time is up. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for accepting the late submission. The reason I tend to do that is to try and save myself repeating obvious things that you've already read. So it's a concise document that you can go over and hopefully save time. Sometimes councils aren't as generous as 20 minutes and can be as short as 5. So it's a difficult one. I'm sure I won't bore you for 20 minutes. However, yes, the application, the original license that is at that premises, I actually did the application back in 2022, which went to before a subcommittee and was granted. Now, once this new application was put in for the hours, the applicant was shocked at the representations, especially from the police, as he said, well, you know, his comment was, I've never had any antisocial behaviour or anything at the shop. But after going through them, I sat down with him and explained to him that it's not only the police, it's obviously the local residents are concerned. And their concern is this might cause, as they've said, late night drinking, antisocial behaviour outside his premises. Again, his comment to me was, there has never been any antisocial behaviour reported as far as he is aware. And he's never had any problems at the shop. He's had quite a few visits over the last couple of years from the council and from the Metropolitan Police Service. He's passed all his test purchases and everything else, and he does feel that he runs a pretty tight ship. Marcella kindly said that the council had already contacted 64 local residents, and I think there were 3, maybe 4 responses. Now, the responses were what might happen, what could happen, and what their fears are. And I think that is something that I get whenever we go for later hours. There are always people concerned that these things could happen. The original application that was put back in 2022 was a very robust application. The conditions are quite extensive. That was done because of the history of the premises, and I felt that it needed a robust operating schedule to ensure that the premises were run properly and within the Licensing Act. He has proved to be able to do that, as he has never had any issues at the premises. Hence my comment that I didn't want to just add conditions to this application just for the sake of adding conditions. I really did feel that it was quite robust. However, we are open to, if there are any specific areas that the committee feels need to be tightened up, yes, we are open to any suggestions. But my main concern with this is that every representation seems to be harping on that what could happen. Well, you know, the world could end tomorrow, to be honest with you. And as long as he is running the premises in the correct manner, he does everything that he's supposed to do, there should not be any reason why there should be any difficulties at the premises. However, I said to him that the hours can be very emotive and people do have concerns. So his main reason for looking for the later hours, and I know it doesn't come under the Act, but all businesses struggling at the moment. And he feels that some extra time for him to trade, but obviously the extra money that he hopes that would bring in would make the difference between him surviving and him going under. The reason that he wants to go later, it's for, I asked him who his primary customers would be after 11 o'clock. And he did say that he gets a lot of shift workers who work at the airports that come to the shop, but he's closed, so he can't obviously serve them. So he said that the extra hours would help that. Local residents have asked, and it's not always councillors just for alcohol, because he's a general store. So it might be milk, eggs, whatever, as well as a bottle of wine or whatever else they would want. The other thing is that if you don't sell the alcohol, they don't come. So they might come and buy 4 beers, but on top of that, they'll buy a loaf of bread, a pint of milk, and some butter and cheese or whatever. But he loses that business. And local residents have said there is nowhere else nearby them that is open after 11 o'clock. So it's difficult for them. That was the other consideration he had. However, after speaking to him about the hours, I said to him, this is all about trust. So far, from what I can see, you have built trust in the community up to that time. You haven't had any issues. But to go from 11 o'clock to 3 o'clock might be a bit of a stretch. And obviously, with the representations that have come in, I feel that that is more of the concerns that local residents and the police have. So I said to him, look, why don't we look at reducing your hours for now, run it again for another year, and then maybe put in for an extra hour in a year's time. So hence the late submission that you've got in front of you, which I think reduces it to from 3 o'clock to 1 o'clock. And on Sunday, I think the time stays the same. So that's quite a reduction on the original application. And we hope that the residents and the police and the other people that sent in representations will see that he's trying to work with the community. He always has. There have actually been some comments made on Facebook and the social media asking why he's been objected to. We like him. He's a nice guy. He speaks to us when he comes, and these sort of things. So I think what he's saying to me, he does have a good reputation and it does have good contact with the local community. And he's a bit surprised that it was so vehemently objected to the people that did object, just based on the basis that what might happen. But there's no evidence to support those concerns. But to work with the community, as I've said, he is happy to reduce the hours and work with the community, show that he can run it until 1 o'clock, and then maybe next year he'll go for 1:30, 2 o'clock, if need be. But I think that is the only way sometimes to build trust and to show that the premises can be run within the licensing act, uphold the licensing objectives, and be a successful ongoing business. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Samaru, for your presentation. Councillor Haji Michael, do you have any questions for the applicant's agent?
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Giles. Mr. Samaru, thank you for the late material. If you could point me to, is there one significant representation or fact that you would like to bring to our attention? What would be the strongest argument in the late materials with respect to the applicant?
Sorry, Councillor Hadji Michael, is that with response to the representations we received or what we submitted?
Well, on the basis of your submissions,
yes,
but also balancing your perspective of the representations that have been received, what would be the strongest argument for an extension of the hours for the applicant? What would be the, you've mentioned the economic factor, but could you just either reaffirm that or give us what would be the strongest argument?
I think the strongest argument is the fact why the client initially came to me, and that he said there is a real need for somewhere to be open after 11 o'clock. Now, I would understand the concerns if this shop was in the middle of the high street and the pubs are closing at 11 or 12 and there's loads of people milling around. I can understand some of the comments, but where it is placed, people only come there out of a matter of need, and it will only serve the direct local residents, of which Marcella quite kindly said there are probably 64 within 50 metres or 100 metres. And those people are his mainstay. And they're the ones that are asking him, why can't you stay open later? You know, so that was the initial reason, Councillor. The other main concern of mine was that there were some things regarding drug dealing and so on and so forth, which he has never seen. We've never had any correspondence from anybody to look at this. So this was a bit of a shock to him. He doesn't. He's a nice chap. He doesn't want to deal with drug dealers and that, but he's never had those issues to deal with. I did ask him what he would do if there was anything like that. He said, I'll call the police. However, he's never had to so far. So.
Thank you, Mr. Samaru. If I could, Councillor Giles, have a follow-up question. Mr. Samaru, thank you for the clarification. I do recognise that the 60-odd individuals or households are very much the basis of the required reaching out to community. But have you had any economic modelling done in terms of just the applicant's understanding? How many more customers would be served over a 365-day period over the year? Is it 60 customers, or is it 120 customer visits, or would there be some quantum? Thank you.
It's a good question, Councillor, and that I have to be straightforward with you and say we don't know, because generally the people that are coming to the shop, it's already closed and gone home. So it does depend on, I suppose, if we did some sort of research, would be how many trains come into the station between 11 and 1 o'clock. But he said to me, is a significant amount of people that do come to him in the daytime and say, can you not stay open later? What that significant number is, I honestly don't know.
Thank you very much for those very candid and very detailed answers. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tylan, do you have any questions for the applicant's agent?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, if I could ask one question. I'm concerned about the representation from the police regarding antisocial behavior and the inspection of the premises on October. That CCTV wasn't working, or only had recording of up to 21 days. And there's no records of training. I know that has been put right now. The other thing is about the antisocial behavior. The local ward councillor and the police are concerned. Apparently there are activities now. There have been reports, particularly outside in the car park, and their concern is that in the extending the hours selling alcohol may increase this situation further. So would you be commenting on anything that regarding to the objection?
Yes, Councillor, thank you very much. Yes, he was concerned when he received the representations because he has never been notified of any drug dealing or antisocial behaviour in the past. With the comment that this could increase, of course, it could increase if he didn't operate his premises the way he does. And he wasn't in touch, and he didn't want to involve the local community or the police should he have any difficulties. With regard to reports in the past, nothing has ever been reported to him, and I didn't see anywhere in the representations any specific reports that had been made, no quiz reports or visits or anything. With the visit on the 22nd, yes, there was a difficulty with the CCTV, only that it was only recording for 21 days. Now, I asked him, you know it's supposed to be 31 days. Why was it only recording for 21? He said, to be honest, no, he said, I didn't know. I've never had to download it for anybody. I check it once a month. Is it working? Yes, it is. But because I've never had to download it or download anything for anybody, I wasn't aware. However, councillors, that was put right the following day. The police have been back in, they have checked it, and they did confirm that they were happy with everything. With regard to the training books, there is him and one other chap that works in the shop with him from time to time. The other chap, I think, has a personal license anyway. So as far as training him was concerned, he felt was unnecessary, but he has now got a training book that he is aware that he's got to fill in, and his refusals book and everything else. So he is now up to date with those necessary that necessary paperwork.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Just a few questions, if I may, and mine also largely come off the back of the representation from PC Hopkins. I just wonder how the applicant's comments to the police on their visit on the 7th of November relate to the application, specifically the point from the applicant that from 2300 hours the shop would remain closed and the venue would only trade through a serving batch, which is what the police say the applicant told him. Because when I was looking at the application form in section 16, I couldn't see any change to the operating schedule in terms of a new condition around that. And so I just wondered if maybe, Mr. Samaru, you could just shed some light on that, because I'm just a little bit confused.
Councillor Giles, yeah, I'm a bit confused as well, because it's not something that's ever been mentioned to me, apart from when I received the representation from the police. I think sometimes, you know, my customers get nervous talking to the police, and sometimes they say whatever they think they need to say to get rid of them. Regarding a serving hatch, it may be something that if you would consider that he is thought of, but it's not something that he's mentioned to me. However, I would have thought that would have been more applicable, like they do at a petrol station or something, if it was being still looked at for 3 o'clock. To extend the hour of opening for 1 hour, I don't really think that would be applicable in this case.
Okay, so it's not the applicant's intention to put in a serving hatch? Now,
no.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think my only other, query, and I'll reserve comment for later, is just in relation to the police's final specific concern. Now, condition 26 of the licence, as it would be and as it currently is, states the external areas of the premises will be monitored by the DPS and PLH to ensure that no nuisance is caused to local residents, other business operators, or the general public. Now, the police say they can't see how that condition can be met if the application is granted. I just wondered if you would be able just to comment on that concern.
Yes, I think there was something that we mentioned in the late representation. The outside area does need to be monitored, and it's happy to put extra additional cameras there. And obviously, if he does see anything, regardless, to be honest, whether it's to do with his shop or not, it's something that he can help the local police and the local community to control. Because I'm sure that the railway network and everything, if they see anything and it's not being monitored constantly like it would be in his premises, they're not really going to tell anybody about it. So I think it's an additional security step that would help.
Thank you very much. Mr. Summery, thank you. If you stay on the call, we'd be grateful. But we're going to move on now to the responsible authorities. And so if I can first call on the Metropolitan Police, so that's Mr. Soleimani, PC Hopkins and PC Hume. Now, collectively, you have up to 5 minutes to speak. So I'm not sure how you want to divvy that up. And Alice, again, will advise you collectively when you have 1 minute left and then when your time is up. And as with the applicant's agent, afterwards, if we have any questions, we'll put them to you. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Is there any scope for potentially a bit more time, given there was quite a lot to respond to in what the applicant said?
I'm afraid the times are prescribed, just in the interests of fairness. But if there are specific points that you perhaps want us to go into a bit more depth on, if you perhaps give us a high-level overview, then I'm sure in the questions we will no doubt want to know more.
Certainly, I appreciate that, Chair. Well, I'll take it my time starts from now, and I'll begin just with saying, firstly, of course, the police are firmly opposed to this application, primarily due to the risks it poses to public disorder and to nuisance. But just to briefly address some points made by the applicant's representative, we were told the shop has never had any problems. There's never been any ASB. I mean, I'll come back to this, but there are reports of ASB. The local neighborhood policing team says there's ASB. It's not true the shop has never had issues. The police showed 3 crime reports relating to shoplifting in the premises. So it's not this perfectly run premises. And another reason that's true is because, as we've identified, there has been numerous breaches of the conditions. They can say those conditions aren't important. They can say that, well, we're going to fix them. But the reality is operators have to be responsible. They have to be diligent. They have to stay within the legal terms of their conditions. And this operator hasn't been doing that. He's been careless. He's been reckless. We were also told that this application could be apparently a difference between this premises surviving and going under commercially. We've not been given any evidence of that. When the police talked to the operator, he told us the reason he was applying was because the locals had asked him to. He didn't say he was going under. We would say a few things about this. One, if there's actually such a substantial commercial benefit to serving alcohol that late, it means that he's expecting a lot of footfall. If he's expecting a lot of footfall, then the points we've made about the risks of further antisocial behavior and people congregating are likely to be true. But we think that, yes, so the reality is if it's actually commercially useful to him, that means there are indeed going to be risks. And he could just extend the hours he's open without serving alcohol as well if he wanted to improve his business. And I don't think that would be a matter for the licensing regime. And we're finally told that the idea of this application is to build trust, to show he can have later hours. The best way to build trust is to stay within the terms of his license as it is, and then we can see. Anyway, to the police's substantive case. Firstly, we're very worried about 3 things: the impact on crime and public order, the impact on nuisance, and the poor management of the premises. There is a confirmed problem with antisocial behavior problem per the neighborhood policing team, per the locals. The fact that the applicant says he hasn't seen any of this and hasn't noticed this just indicates to us he's not being diligent enough. He's not taking in the problems that are in his area. We think the risk of extending the hours until 1 a.m. on weekends and similar times during the week, until midnight during the week, is that, well, it's twofold. Firstly, people get drunker and drunker as the night goes on. So you're more likely to see criminality, you're more likely to see antisocial behavior at those times at night. You have less passive surveillance because there's less people around, the area gets quiet. And you also have this problem that this being the last open place, because everywhere else stops selling alcohol at 11 p.m., it means people are going to congregate here when they want to buy alcohol in this large empty car park surrounded by residential premises. For those reasons, we don't see how Condition 26 can be complied with if this is allowed. In terms of nuisance, many of the same reasons we think this is going to cause a lot of noise, it's likely to cause a lot of littering, depositing of gas canisters. People already report their problems with loud music, cars slamming doors, shouting, drunken behavior. This is surrounded by residences, this car park. There's not going to be passive surveillance. People are going to behave badly. They're going to be very drunk by this point of the night. They're all going to congregate here because it's the last place that's open. Again, there's just a serious risk of nuisance, serious risk of harm to that licensing objective. The consultation responses make clear the locals are very worried about this as it currently stands, and they rightly think it's going to get worse if the hours are even later. The responses from the other responsible authorities support our view on this.
1 minute left.
Thank you. Our final point is that you have all those risks, but then you have this operator that we don't trust can manage these risks properly. And the reasons for that are, firstly, as we pointed out, there have been a litany of breaches of the conditions. He didn't keep enough CCTV footage, which is important for evidence gathering for potential crimes. He breached conditions 14 through 19 by not having any training records. He appears to have breached condition 22 by allowing people other than him to sell alcohol when he's not there. Again, it just shows that there's a fundamental lack of respect for his license and for the licensing regime. The truth is, when we are dealing with quite a risky application, which is to open substantially later, to be a congregating point for nuisance and antisocial and drunken behavior, we would at least hope to see a trusted operator who we know can manage these risks properly. That is not this operator. They've not proven this to us at all. It's the premises which is recorded.
Sorry, time is up.
And that is essentially our submissions. We don't think the benefits of this justify the risks, the licensing objectives.
Thank you, Mr. Soleimani. Thank you very much. Councillor Tyerland, do you have any questions for the police, either Mr. Soleimani or either of the PCs? Thank you. Councillor Hadji Michael, do you have any questions for the police?
Just one very quick question. With respect to the inability to hold the full 31-day record, is that on the face of it an offence, or just to get an idea of the severity of that lapse?
Well, Councillor, essentially any breach of a licensing condition is a criminal offence, and that we think is straightforwardly a breach. If your condition says you must hold evidence for 31 days and you hold it just for 3 weeks, that's just a breach. You're not in compliance. And it matters, it's not just a technical complaint. This matters because when crimes are reported, evidence gathering can take time, investigations can take time. We as the police don't want to turn up to a premise and say, this crime happened in your area, you could have very valuable surveillance, and then find actually he's deleted it, not in line with his conditions. I mean, that is a breach, it is criminality. It shows a lack of respect for the license.
Thank you. I can see Mr. Bishop, our legal advisor, has his hand raised. Guy, can I ask you to jump in here?
Yes, just very quickly, I was just adding on to what Mr. Soleimani's just said, which of course is that each day would amount to an offence. It wouldn't just be that it's an offence because the breach has occurred. It's each day would be an offence technically.
Thank you. I can see that the applicant's agent also has his hand up. Now, unfortunately, Mr. Samuel, you're not able to comment at this point, but I will be asking you to come back and sum up the application and respond to any points raised at the end of the hearing. So if you'd be so kind as to just make notes for the time being, I will ask you to come back later on in the hearing. Councillor Hadji Michael, does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Councillor Giles. No further questions.
Thank you. And just a couple from me, if I may. I mean, we're fortunate to have the local PC on the call this morning. So just very briefly, PC Hume, if you'd be willing, I just wondered if you'd be able to speak to crime and ASB in the area, just to get sort of your thoughts from an on-the-ground perspective.
Yeah, of course, not a problem. Kind of just listening to the points raised, my main issues would be, at the moment, there's a big increase in kind of antisocial behaviour, especially among probably 16 to 25-year-olds in the area. I mean, my main concern would be the fact that this shop would be the only shop open in an area where there's already issues on Stopworth Avenue, North Parade. If you cross the road from over Bridge Road, that takes you to Churchfield, there's issues there. Obviously, if people are buying alcohol, where are they going? Are they just drinking on the streets? Are they taking it to the park, or are they causing issues there? Also, there's been a lot of issues on North Parade at the moment, which is obviously very close to this shop. The Morrison shuts at about 11, I believe. Obviously, if that shuts at 11, I don't want the issues from that store to pass over to Victoria News. In the past 3 months, there's been 13 shoplifting incidents from Morrison. With that in mind, I wouldn't want that to kind of fall over onto Victoria News. And obviously, if the applicant's saying that he's struggling to uphold his business at the moment, if that does pass over to him, then I feel that he would probably go under. Just further as well, in regards to opening late, there's not a huge amount of footfall in the area anyway at that time, I don't believe. Just from I've worked in the area for 2 years now, and there honestly isn't much footfall. The local trains end at about 11:30, which will give him half an hour extra to sell alcohol. And again, buses around the same time. So for me, it just doesn't, the benefit of opening late just doesn't really have a positive impact for one, the shop owner, or for the residents, I don't believe.
Thank you. That's very useful. Thank you. Just finally, maybe for yourself, Mr. Soleimani, I mean, I note in your or PC Hopkins representation helpfully listed the other premises which have licenses. Now, I did note that although they don't use it, the Sainsbury's local 30 metres away does have licensable hours through to midnight, 7 days a week. I mean, I just wonder, in your view and in the police's view, has the proposed reduction in the hours, 12 a.m. Monday to Thursday, 1 a.m. Friday to Saturday, and then 11 p.m. Sunday, has that reduction changed the scale, perhaps, to which the police object to the change?
I think there's two things to say about that. And first, with regards to Sainsbury's, it's important for the committee to deal with facts on the ground. So if the reality is Sainsbury's isn't selling past 11 p.m., then the area is going to be quiet from 11 p.m. It's not going to have people going to buy drinks or getting drunk from 11 p.m. So that's the status quo we're worried about changing. So the actual hours of the license aren't relevant to facts that are grounded that way. In terms of how this has affected the police's objection, and maybe the officers can add more to this, but what I would say is this, that obviously if you're open until 3 a.m., there's even more risk, but we still think the risk here is substantial. And what we're concerned about is identifying and making sure there are not substantial risks to the licensing objectives of crime and disorder and public nuisance. And for the reasons we've given, even opening until 1 a.m. on the weekends, which is a substantial increase of about 2 hours, does pose a serious risk to public disorder. And being open until midnight on the weekdays poses a risk too. And the main issue, there's two main issues that I mentioned. The first is congregation, which is because in reality this will be the latest open premises and substantially the latest open one. People will gather there to buy drinks and to get drunk. They have a large empty car park in front surrounded by residential areas, which makes this a sensitive area and a place where people are going to sit in their cars, play music, hang out there. That poses a real risk. So I think ultimately, even though they've reduced the hours, there's still a serious risk. I mean, that risk still exists. And we're still talking about extending into hours beyond 11 p.m. I mean, 11 p.m. is naturally when you would usually set the limit for hours, because that's when it's fair to say people are sleeping, they're going to be disturbed. If you go past that, weekends go past that by 2 hours, that's going to cause serious disturbance. So we still think there's a serious risk to the licensing objectives here.
Thank you. PC Hopkins, do you want to just briefly comment?
Only on the fact that, Councillor, the fact that you mentioned Sainsbury's with regards to state benefit to a midnight licence. During my first visit to the area, I attended all the off licences in the local community just to see how things were operating. I spoke to the DPS of Sainsbury's. He does benefit for a midnight sale of alcohol. He actually stated to me that they choose not to open into those hours due to the issues that they've received from local pubs. And they decided to actually terminate the sale of alcohol prior to 11 o'clock to prevent any further issues inside their venue. So again, I look at that as a responsible operator. And again, that fundamentally makes up our decision-making process, should we say, whereby it would be a concern if any extended hours were in Victoria.
Thank you. No, that's very useful. Thank you both. Again, if I could ask the three of you to stay on the call, I'll call on you to make some concluding remarks in a short while. But I'll now move on, if I may, to Richard O'Dell, who is the Council's Environmental Protection Officer. Richard, again, as per the others, you have up to 5 minutes to speak. And if you're still going at 4 minutes, Alice will advise you when you have 1 minute left.
Thank you, Chair. As we've heard, this variation originally sought to substantially increase the hours of the retail of alcohol, and the hours of premises would be open to the public. While these have been pulled back, they remain a concern and would, in my opinion, create conflict with the Council's prevention of public nuisance licence objective. Providing alcohol until 1 a.m. Friday to Saturday and midnight Monday to Thursday will, in addition to local residents, attract not only those potential customers already passing the premises along Bridge Road, but will attract others in the wider area. Once open and trading at this late hour, it is likely to become a magnet for customers leaving other licensed premises after they have closed. It is reasonable to presume that some of these customers would already have been consuming alcohol for a number of hours already. The arrival of people at these premises, both on foot and in vehicles, has the potential to create noise. While it is likely that many customers will conduct themselves in a responsible manner, given the close proximity to residential property, it is likely that those who do not, and potentially under the influence of alcohol, will create disturbance through raised voices, loud music plays in vehicles, slamming vehicle doors, and general antisocial behaviour. The applicant had provided no detail about how these activities would be managed at the time of any disturbance. And it is my experience that due to concerns about health and safety, staff are not usually advised to engage with customers behaving in this manner. I also have concerns about customers in vehicles and parking in the large car park at the front of the premises rather than leaving the area after purchasing food and alcohol. We have already heard about the suggested hours in the Council's statement of a licensing policy. These hours are carefully considered based upon the experience of the Council and responsible authorities, and they seek to create a reasonable balance between enabling responsible licensable activities and promoting the licensing objectives. It is incumbent upon the applicant to demonstrate how they will manage their business to meet the licensing objectives, and this is especially so when they request hours beyond those suggested in the policy. The applicant has given no additional information on how the requirements of the public nuisance licensing objective will be met for the hours requested. I would be willing to permit the variation to enable an extension of hours to mirror those in the licensing policy. This will allow an additional hour on Friday and Saturday and an additional 30 minutes on Sunday, but I cannot agree to the hours requested. I am not convinced that there are any additional conditions which may be imposed that will allay my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Tylan, do you have any questions for Richard?
No, thank you.
Councillor Hadji Michael, do you have any questions for Richard?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Giles. Richard, just in case I was taking notes as you were speaking, just in case I may have misheard, is it that you would be comfortable if there was a 1 hour extension to some of the days. Was that correct, or did I mishear you?
That was correct. I think that the council's policy statement on licensing is there for a reason, and it does suggest certain hours, which have been carefully thought through. And whilst each case and each application is considered on its own merits, I think that from my perspective, I think it's not unreasonable to consider that those hours would not be inappropriate for this particular application.
Okay. Thank you very much, Richard.
Thank you. And I don't have any questions. So, Richard, again, if I could ask you to stay on the call while we now next, if I could call on Louise Gallagher, who represents the council's public health team, to present. I'm sure you know the procedure by now. 5 minutes. Alice will advise you when you have 1 minute left. Over to you, Louise. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So Public Health believes that as Victoria News would be the only off-sales licensed premises in the locality selling alcohol after 11, this would encourage people who have already consumed alcohol on a night out and whose judgment will be impaired to purchase more alcohol on their way home, causing disorder and public nuisance. I'd just like to add that alcohol is a factor in 40% of all violent crimes in England, as well as contributing to public disorder and antisocial behaviour in our communities. This will also contribute to nighttime noise in a residential area. And based on that information, I would propose that the variation should be refused. Thank you.
Nice and concise. Lovely. Thank you very much. Councillor Hadji Michael, do you have any questions for Louise?
Thank you very much, Councillor Giles. Louise, thank you for being the quick and incredibly clear person at today's meeting. Could I just get a sense of, this is a strong and a very clear position by Public Health in opposition to the full application as presented? You're nodding, so is that a firm yes?
Yes, that is correct.
Great, thanks. I didn't want to jump to any conclusions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Tarnan, do you have any questions for Louise?
No, thank you.
And I don't either. So thank you very much. I will call on you again in a short while. So that concludes the representations from the responsible authorities. But we're also joined by one other person. So as set out in the report, in accordance with the council's licensing policy, 62 addresses were consulted in writing, with 4 valid representations being received, which you can find in Annex 4. One other person, Mr. David Williams, is in attendance today. So if I can now call on David to present his submission. David, you have, again, up to 5 minutes. Alice will advise you when you have 1 minute remaining. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask before I start, I was also asked to speak on behalf of my neighbour, and I think he's emailed Alice in Democratic Services. So I don't know if that gives me an extra 5 minutes if I do go over my 5 or not.
I'm afraid it doesn't, but again, if there are any points that you'd like us maybe to apply a little bit more scrutiny to, if you maybe give a high level overview, if we have questions, obviously we can come back to you.
Okay, so obviously I'm objecting to this application, and my representations are made under the Prevention of Crime and Disorder, Prevention of Public Nuisance and Protection of Children from Harm licensing objectives in this matter. My rep's quite clear. The responsible authorities for crime, disorder, ASB and noise and nuisance, or the council's experts in these areas, all object to the application in whole and are present here today. The main thrust of my objection is increased ASB and noise nuisance and crime and disorder with every extra hour the premises remain open after 11 PM, causing residents constant disturbance. We already suffer quite a lot of ASB and noise nuisance from the station car park area. This would only increase, as will the drug dealing and other crime, related crime, if they are attracted to the area with later opening hours. So particularly in the summer months when it is particularly bad. What I would say is if the applicant hasn't seen any ASB or crime and disorder in the car park, he never sticks his head out of the door. I live directly opposite that location and there are lots of ASB incidents and crime and disorder. I've walked through drug deals coming out of the station at night time. So that's just a fantasy on the applicant's part. So everywhere else is closed by 11 p.m. There are no other shops open after 11 p.m, particularly off licenses in this area. So it would be like a magnet to people leaving the pub, down the road, fancy more drinks, they'll go there. Vehicles will obviously park in the car park as a natural place outside, and they will gather afterwards as well. Already we suffer youths going into the station for alcohol at night because it's not locked up, so that remains open all night. So if the shop's open until 3 or 1 a.m, as the application's been modified slightly, we're going to get increased problems with that as well. Sorry, I did make some notes. I'm just referring to them at the moment. As the police said, Sainsbury's have a licence until midnight, but don't open because of incidents with drunks, etc., after 11 p.m. at night and late night disturbances. I can't make it clear enough. There's nowhere else open after 11. We all work in my household or go to school, as do my neighbours, and we go to sleep at 11 o'clock during the week, and we get up at 7. So if there's noise, there will be noise. There's no doubt about it. It's not a maybe. There will be noise from vehicles parking up, persons gathering outside, and probably youths as well, which we suffer quite a lot of. So there are no conditions that you can add to that premises licence that will cover the external area, because you can't condition it. But if you allow later hours for that premises, the people will come, people make noise, drunk people make more noise and antisocial behaviour. So, you know, what I would say is please don't grant this extension in the hours, because it's going to cause us, the residents, a lot of issues. What I'd also say is the applicant has said that local residents have asked him to stay open. Well, where are the supporting representations from those residents? There aren't any. And I would suggest that any residents that do say they want it open later don't live near enough to be affected by any disturbance that will be caused. So the council's own statement of licensing policy states...
1 minute left.
Okay, the council's own licensing policy states 11 p.m. terminal hour for sale of alcohol for these sorts of premises. Further to that, paragraph 76 says, when relevant representations are received and the council's considering departing from the guidelines that are shown, the committee should consider if it would result in an increase in noise and nuisance to residents in the area. Yes, of course it will. Also, whether it would result in an increase or decrease in crime and ASB in the area, a definite increase, and also whether it would affect the safety and amenity of local residents. Of course it will. I'm going to be kept up late at night by cars banging their doors, car radios turned up, drunks gathering outside, continuing their party that they've been to, because they can go and get more alcohol up until 1 a.m. And as for compliance and engagement, on the sorry, I'm just going to refer to the further items.
Time's up.
Mr. Williams, that does bring you to your 5 minutes, I'm afraid. But thank you nonetheless for making those comments and representations. Councillor Thailand, do you have any questions for Mr. Williams?
No, thank you.
And Councillor Hadji Michael, do you have any questions for Mr. Williams?
No, thank you, Councillor Giles.
Thank you. Neither do I. Mr. Williams, if you stay on the call, we're nearing the end of the hearing now. I'm going to move on to closing statements. We'll first hear from responsible authorities, then Mr. Williams, and then the applicant's agent. Now, I'm aware there's a lot of people on the call, and while there isn't a formal time limit, I would ask if you can if you could be concise in summing up, and also if where possible you could avoid retreading points you've already raised, I'd be grateful. If I can first call on Mr. Soleimani for the Metropolitan Police.
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep this brief. The police's firm view remains that these hours should not be extended at all, essentially for two reasons. Firstly, it's already at the latest opening hour for this area, which means this will become a congregation point if it's opened any later. Secondly, there are already serious problems with antisocial behavior in this area, and opening it any later into these very late hours when people are sleeping is going to cause real harm to that licensing objective. Ultimately, we'd say the question for the committee is this. You have to take the risk to the licensing objectives this application poses and ask whether those risks are justified. And we don't think they are. Firstly, because the benefits of this application are not clear at all. We don't believe that this is going to make the difference between this business succeeding and failing for the reasons we already gave. We don't think there's a real justification to opening even later. He's already got substantially late hours for the service of alcohol, as late as anyone else in the area. There's no reason this business really needs the footfall that comes from people turning up at midnight or 1 a.m. In terms of the risk, we think the risks are really very serious, and we've outlined those already. I won't repeat them. But it's clear from neighborhood policing, from the consultation responses, from the representation of Mr. Williams to this committee, that there are already real problems with ASB in this car park. It's already loud talking and shouting, car doors slamming and radios blaring, litter and bad behavior. That's the status quo. If this place is open any later into the night, if it becomes a congregation point, which it will if it's the last open place serving alcohol in the local area, those problems will get worse. There's a serious risk in this local area, in this quiet residential area. It will make things substantially worse for local residents, and the committee has to keep that in mind. And for reasons already given, we think, and for those similar reasons, it will increase the likelihood of crime and disorder in the area. One last point I'll make is just about policy and the council's policy. And there's two things to note. The first is that at paragraph 71 of the policy, the council makes clear that, and I quote, the evidence that extending opening hours has seen increased levels of crime and antisocial behavior, such as noise and disturbance to local residents living near licensed premises that continue through the early hours. The council is already cognizant in this policy that extending the hours for premises does lead to more crime and more antisocial behavior. The second point, and I don't think Mr. Adele was saying this, but just to be clear, the policy doesn't say that if the application is within the set hours, that means you should approve it or there's a presumption in favor of it. It just says you'll treat the application more favorably than one that isn't within those set hours. And of course that's true. But the question for the council is still, in the specific circumstance of this case, is it right to extend the opening hours? And we say no, because this will become a congregation point, because there's already problems with ASB, and that poses too big a risk to licensing objectives. And those are the police's submissions.
Muted.
I beg your pardon, I'm muted. Thank you for your comments, Mr. Soleimani. PC Hopkins, do you have anything to add? I'm going to take the silence as a no. And PC Hume, do you have anything to add?
No, completely agree with what's been said already. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If I could then move to Richard Odell. Richard, do you have any closing comments you wish to make?
No, no further comments, sir, Councillor.
Thank you very much indeed. Louise Gallagher, do you have any further comments you wish to make?
No, nothing more from me, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Mr. Williams, are there any final comments you wish to make?
Yes, I'd like to say to the committee, please do not grant this application, as it will be to the detriment of local residents. It will not be a positive, as suggested in the additional material that was sent by the applicant yesterday. Also, the fact that in that additional material, he claimed that they were completely law-abiding, etc., and the police visit in November clearly shows that they're not, and they've breached several conditions of that licence, which I think the committee should bear in mind, especially as they knew they were applying for something extra and they still couldn't get it right. So, you know, what are they going to be like when they're not asking for something? So please, committee, don't grant this application. You're going to make our lives hell. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams, for your closing comments. And finally, Mr. Samu, I know you've been keen to come back as we've been going through. So would you like to make a closing statement on behalf of your applicant, please?
Yes, thank you. I'll keep it brief and really just cover some of the points that have been raised. Not all of them do I disagree with, and I do feel there are some points that have been raised that I need to clarify with you. It appears to me that most of the representations are supposition. What might happen, what could happen. And obviously people have prepared for this hearing in advance with the terminal hour as 3 o'clock. As I said to you in my opening statement, I spoke to my client regarding the representations. And he felt that, okay, he doesn't want to fall out with his residents. They're his customers at the end of the day. So he was happy to try and come to a compromise and reduce the operating hours. Your licensing officer stated that the council had written to 64 local residents. And as I mentioned, that must be within like 50 metres or 100 metres of the premises. 4 of them, I think, wrote in a representation. And Mr. Williams was good enough to appear today. So as far as I can see, 1 out of the 64 actually appeared in front of you to put their points across. Again, it all seems to be a little bit supposition, only because, as I said at the beginning, the police do have concerns. I understand their concerns. However, none of these concerns have ever been raised in the past since he's been open. If he had, he would have worked to and probably contacted me to try and work to see what he needs to do to stop these potential antisocial behaviour. But as I said to you at the beginning, he has not been aware, not because he hasn't stuck his head out the window, because outside of his shop where you can see he said to me that he hasn't seen or had any issues. I would also ask the police why they didn't add into their representation any CRIS reports or reports of visiting the premises. If this has been such a problem in the past, why have they never visited and spoken to him or even taken the opportunity to write to him? Their representation only came about at their visit on the 24th of November, which is the first time in 2 years the police have ever bothered to visit him on any of these matters. Yes, we agree that the CCTV was running for 21 days instead of 31 days. As soon as this was outlined to him, the next day it was put right, only because he just wasn't aware. If the police had visited him 2 years ago, it would have been put right 2 years ago. With reference to the training books and refusals books, the refusals books he had, the training book he didn't, and as I mentioned to you, his other member of staff has a full personal license. But I said to him to keep his training records up to date. I will go in probably as soon as I can after the new year and do a retrain on him and any other staff that he wants doing. So that will be put right. As I said, I understand the concerns the police have. However, as I mentioned, if this premises was in the middle of the high street, I would understand the situation with congregation, with people coming and going there. This is not. It is in a quieter neighbourhood, as David has outlined to you. But I would think that most people would either get there, they would drive there. So it's not a matter of loads of people holding up at the door. And if they're driving, they're probably not drinking in excess alcohol because they're driving. But this shop is not only for alcohol. People will go there to buy groceries and other things as well. So I would like the committee to look at the whole picture and ask yourselves, if this shop has been such a problem in the past, why has nobody ever highlighted it in the past? And only because they've asked for later hours. Now, he did take into consideration 3 o'clock was probably a bit too late, so he reduced it quite significantly to 1 o'clock and 12 o'clock. As I say, to hope to build trust with the local community and the police and have more contact with everybody. And if he does have issues like any of your licensees would have, that they're there to help, not just to hinder. And I feel that in a way, this is just a block thing that this can happen and this will happen. The only positive person that's been in front of you today is Richard O'Dell, who has said that, okay, an extra hour, he would probably be happy with. Now, if it's an extra hour, why not an extra 2 hours? And, you know, we're talking minutes here, but it does make a difference to him as far as his business is concerned, not because he's failing. You know, if you don't grant this license, he's not going to go out of business tomorrow. But it does make the difference between it being a successful business and a business that's just paying the bills. So that's my point regarding, is he going to be a successful business? Yes, he is a successful business. He's not going out of business tomorrow, but he's not making any money. And that's his issue. With regards to Sainsbury's, if Sainsbury's has a license till midnight and chooses to close at 11, that's their business. They're Sainsbury's. They can afford to do that. Now, he is a small shop trying to feed his family in a quiet area. There were references made to him being connected with the previous people and selling to underage. He runs a very robust set of conditions there where he follows Challenge 25. He doesn't sell to underage. If he had, the police would have been aware of it. So those inferences, I think, are just there to bolster up any representation. And I think hopefully the council will see that in the fact that, as I said before, nobody has engaged with him in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Samaru. The subcommittee will now withdraw to make its decision. It will be confirmed to all parties by email, and the full decision notice with reasons will then be sent to all parties within 5 working days. If I could then please ask the members of the subcommittee and, of course, Mr. Bishop, to reconvene in our decision meeting as soon as possible so that we can make our deliberations and come to a decision. And finally, just to thank everyone for their time in attending today. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, committee.
Thank you,
Thank
Chair.
you.